Hello and welcome to this latest in our series of videos and reports looking at how the retail industry is meeting the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm delighted to have with me Andrea Bell, who is director of WGSN's Insight team. And WGSN is one of the world leading future and consumer trend forecasters. And I think a key aspect of what we're all facing within the retail industry is how our consumers, your consumers, are behaving and the changes that are happening. So I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to than Andrea. You watch for consumer trends and you're seeing how things develop in a normal world before this happened. But just to sort of start us off, really, I mean, as you've tracked and your team track around the world, what is going on with consumers? I mean, what would you say has surprised you most about the behaviours that we've all been watching and displaying ourselves? Is there something that strikes you more than anything?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the two biggest things kind of globally, and you know, I know we've talked about it, just how COVID-19 has impacted different regions and those regional adaptations, but some of the unifiers globally that have been surprising for us are, one, there's a really big shift to kind of embracing and celebrating those everyday heroes. I think a lot of people in different workforces and industries, whether that was a warehouse worker for a retail location, of course, healthcare, nurses, doctors, there has been a real shift to embracing, celebrating, and wanting to really make sure that those everyday heroes post-COVID are still given the same fair treatment, equality, and respect that they're currently getting in these times. And then while that one is really altruistic and powerful, we've seen a shift, particularly in the US, that is a little bit of a red flag for us in terms of consumer behavior. And that is the initial phase. Again, we're still kind of 50, 60 days in, depending on what area, is people jumping safety for sustainability. And that's something we need to think about globally. So if you think about right now, we see on the news, there's the canals are clear and blue and there's no smog in parts of India. And this is fantastic from an environmental standpoint. We can look at it and go, this is really having an impact. But what's fascinating as well, environmentally, we're doing so much better. Our return to single-use plastics, particularly from retailers and food delivery, has spiked through the roof. And what was shocking when you looked at the data we started tracking in January, coming out of the APAC region, it was all of those things we've done globally, getting rid of straws and the plastic bans and everything has completely exacerbated and swung the other way. So, you've got people ordering.
It's a real dichotomy because we're all celebrating cleaner skies and air, and you would hope we're not going to lose track of that. And but yeah, that's interesting what you're saying. The trade-off. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the trade-offs even from retailers that had plastic bag bans, right? They said, you can only use paper bags or come in with reusable bags, are now having to switch because the consumers don't trust, bring outdoor things into the physical retail space. So you have to use our bags. I mean, it's a whole process that we're going to figure out. And we hope, the initial hope is that this safety versus sustainability will be more short-term and won't have long-term effects. It'll be until there's innovation in packaging and retail design.
Yeah. So obviously this is a truly global pandemic, which began in China, and WGSN has a sizable team in China watching China. So what you were tracking, I guess it was middle of January when it first started emerging, can you look back now and see that the way that consumers behaved in China, has that rolled out across territories around the world, so that truly this is, consumers are behaving in a global way in reaction to COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, particularly from China, it's fascinating because when you think about SARS in 2003, one of the biggest outcomes in terms of shift in consumer behavior, particularly in retail and just consumption, was SARS really drove for China and APAC the rise of e-com. That's what really pushed digital shopping, and it's largely attributed to the rise of Alibaba and the general adoption of we will be shopping and spending more time online. So even in regions for Western Europe and the UK and the US, where different generations or different people were adverse to shopping online. They didn't want to order digitally. That is their lifeline right now, essentially. The grocery stores are closed. So when, in one sense, there's this tech acceleration, right? There's this speed to digital adoption. But on the other side, what we're really seeing come through strong in terms of kind of, again, a global unifier is a return to localism. And particularly even in China, those local markets have really come in strong because, again, it was this, I know where it's coming from. I know who's selling it. I know the traceability aspect towards it. And that continues to go from Europe, and, it kind of just trickles. And what we have been tracking at WGSN is, impact awareness is essentially higher than ever. And what does that look like? And those are two key behavioral shifts that we see tracking for 18 to 24 months. Digital and e-com will continue to push. And of course, this return to localism, where is it from, will continue to thrive even beyond COVID.
Yeah. What's been absolutely fascinating, because most lockdowns, we're still in them here in Europe and in the States. China has come out of it, but we're talking about nearly 2 months that people have been in lockdowns in different markets, and it's been fascinating to see how behaviours over that period have changed through stages. An explosion in what people are putting up on social media and how they're using it. But you at WGSN must be having a field day looking and tracking and trying to make some sense of the behaviours over the longer periods that people have been in lockdown.
Yeah, I would say I feel like now, so more than ever, I think we're all guilty of, there's just so much data coming in, so many data points, and tracking different regional behaviors and adaptations. One of the things that, long term that came in that is kind of recession resistant, or we really see having longevity past this critical 18 to 24 month period that we know our clients are facing is, of course, I know you've been tracking it too, and there was the pandemic pantries, right? There was this push to groceries, and that was the first real big shift globally. I mean, I think Instacart had 218% year over year growth for the month of March, just people ordering online. But now what's fascinating is this shift towards, okay, what do we need long term? What are these everyday items that we will need 18 to 24 months from now? And one of the largest recession resistant categories will continue to be children's wear and kids wear, anything with family. And it's really twofold from a retail and consumer perspective. One, fundamentally, as parents or as grandparents or aunts and uncles, we'll sacrifice our own goods, but we don't want our children to be affected. We don't want them to know, the chaos that is surrounding us all every day, let's be frank. So you'll do little buys. And then long term, depending on childcare and daycare and school, what are the new products and services these children will need? And it's not just children, it's high school, it's college, it's university. So one kind of just really, really solid recession resistant market will continue to be anything around kids wear, and through to basically university.
Yeah, and equally, it's what we've chosen not to buy. I mean, most markets that we've been talking to, fashion has kind of almost stopped dead in terms of its sales. I guess it's that trade-off. You're locked in your house. Why would you want to buy anything to go out? Because you're not going out.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about that is, fashion is fundamentally, this is no shock to anyone shifting and changing. And at WGSN, we keep getting asked, is this the end of fashion? Is this the death of fashion? And anytime there's a huge reset, there's this drive of innovation. So while our typical clothes and buying behaviors have changed, it's fascinating to see what is coming up. So one of them is, particularly for men and women that are working from home, there's been a huge shift towards different undergarments. What do I need sitting down all day versus what am I wearing when I'm wearing a dress or a suit? So intimates market is really thriving right now as people are coming into that space. The second one would be defensive materials and the innovation that's happening there. So we're seeing a lot of changes in silhouettes, people wanting jackets and hoodies that actually can zip around their face. It's March in LA, and I don't want to upset the people in London if it's raining out there, but we're having a heat wave, but yet we've seen a rise in people wanting jackets with gloves and covering. So while the traditional fashion silhouettes and calendars that we're also used to buying towards are radically shifting, there's huge growth in other areas that are unexpected, and we do see it having that knock on. Comfort wear will continue to thrive, 2 mile wear. But then another one I'm guilty of, I just purchased is we're seeing a rise in accessories because we're all doing this. So it's the only way we can, be an individual online is through earrings and necklaces for both men and women. And separately, just a fun one that we've been tracking at WGSN is the rise of blue light glasses. We're all looking at a computer all day and wanting to protect our eyes. So while one market is going to shift dramatically, there will continue to be innovation and growth from a product development perspective.
Yeah, which just leads on to, because the big question retailers and brands are asking is, what's our customer, what's the consumer going to look like and behave like coming out of this lockdown period? I mean, there's research, I think, that shows that it only takes 8 weeks for us to change our habits or habits to change. So what at WGSN do you think will we take away in terms of our consumer behaviors from this period of lockdown that will continue when we emerge into the light?
Well, we can all go outside again. Definitely the first one would be there will be a return and a focus on local money and local economy. And that truly is, there's a sustainability aspect, but like we said, it's not really driven in sustainability. It's about keeping that local money local. So as we all see, when you can walk through your neighborhood and see your retail locations boarded up and your bakeries boarded up and your grocery stores boarded up, that has a huge impact on your psyche. And so what we have started to track, from whether it's China to the UK to the US, we're seeing people really aware that these local shops are closing. So how do we fund that localism? So that will continue to be key. So big box retailers, big stores are going to have to really figure out what their strategy is to create that hyper local sentiment and do it in an authentic way. Don't be tone deaf. Don't just make a commercial saying, we're here for you. What are you really doing to ignite that community and keep that community together? And then second, which will continue to rise, and again, this is fascinating to watch, is the rise of third space markets, which are essentially virtual markets. And it's twofold. One, even the staunchest of people who didn't want to stream online realize that that is a window to the outside world. It's a safety. And of course, it's that survival aspect. So it's this weird Venn diagram of localism will continue to rise, and that will be for key buys, grocery, food, small goods, giftables. But on the flip side, in terms of product development around fashion, accessories, even makeup, you'll see this huge pivot to third space markets.
Right. And so a lot of that started in China. And again, with your team in China, you must have been watching. That was the first lockdown coming down and people emerging back. And we saw a phenomenon like revenge shopping, I think it was called, where people allegedly went out and spent on some of the luxury brands were reporting some of their best ever days. I don't know how that's tracked from here. What is unique to China from that, do you think? And should we expect similar behaviors in other countries?
Yeah, I mean, the revenge buying was fascinating, because I think there was an Hermes store that said they did 2 million in one day. But of course, when you look at what was actually spent, the average order value for that customer was around $145,000, which, I don't know about you, Ian, that's not a typical buying behavior for me. I can't really go out and spend $145,000 in 2 hours.
No.
There was that initial push, right? This initial revenge buying. We are seeing a slower rebound in terms of China. And again, what some of the strategic pushes are is really focusing on digital coupons, and that was one to add that safety layer in, and also to provide that what we called it the power and pack savings. So Alipay and WeChat have really, based on essentially postcodes in China, offered hyper local digital coupons to get you out to your local shops, and it's had a really strong adaptation. We see that really trickling. So they did it for 30 provinces, and it's been fantastic so far to get people out, get them in the streets, but not have the typical revenge spend that unfortunately all of us that can't afford that luxury lifestyle won't. But another thing that I think we see impacting long-term in terms of lessons we can learn from China is they're really focusing on, in terms of product placement and working with the brands as they reopen, that designing for distance and making sure that from the retail locations to the public transport, that safety element is embedded. So one of the things globally we're all going to have to pivot towards is, what does design for distance look like in store, and how do you implement that? If it's contactless and you can't touch it, what does that mean for digital adaptation? Of course, fitting rooms. We're so used to trying on clothes, and a lot of retailers in China have said we can't afford to have anyone get sick, so there's no fitting room. So again, there will be some fundamental shifts in our own retail and consumer shopping experience.
Yeah. It's interesting you've mentioned a few examples. It sounds like you're already starting to track examples of new product development trends, I guess, and innovations that's, a mix of consumer driven, but also the response from brands and retailers. And that's great to hear. I mean, is that something you really see, or is it still too, quite isolated?
I mean, we're definitely starting to see it. I think for the initial one, again, it's these defensive materials and kind of what is shifting in the silhouettes. If you're not traveling this summer, the swimmer is definitely taking hit, those kind of packs, but we're seeing a wider shift. Again, is it blue light glasses? Is it different silhouettes that cover your mouth and face? I don't like to use the word post-traumatic stress design, but that's essentially what we are saying. It's design fundamentally that will drive safety and make people feel protected and comforted. So at WGSN, we've really looked at it from a post-traumatic stress design perspective. But then fundamentally, we need to think about how it impacts every aspect, the retail, hospitality, lifestyle. And what does that mean if everyone's pivoting towards providing masks in store? Is that going to be an everyday item? Will companies and workforces now provide masks for each of their employees? Again, hotels, one of the biggest things they're struggling with is, in terms of a lifestyle rebound, is, you thrive off making sure that there's enough, there's lobbies and pools and all of these. And if we're designing for distance with 6 feet, what does that look like? So fundamentally, this pandemic has impacted every industry, whether it's fashion, travel and lifestyles, beauty, seeing a huge shift in safety and hygienic. It's no longer about makeup and color. It's truly about preventative products. So while the world that we once knew and kind of relied on is no longer there, there will be growth and opportunity in other areas that will serve all of us and serve the consumer needs.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And I wonder how you take those trends and how you envisage the retail landscape, if I can call it that, emerging from this crisis. Will we return to what we knew before, which is only 3 months ago or less? Or are you now seeing, because, here in Europe and obviously in the States, stores they won't reopen, rather. So we're going to have less of them. But WGSN, are you starting to think about what that future retail landscape may look like?
Yeah, we have, and that's the thing. There, unfortunately, I think it's no surprise that there are some fundamental retailers and kind of heritage for all of us, whether it was in the UK or even Western Europe and the US. These heritage stores that we're so familiar with and these shopping experiences may not be here in 18 months. It's that world is shifting, and kind of that's overall commercial real estate has shifted quite a bit. So I think that the real win for brands and what we're tracking is, again, we don't want to use the word phygital, but really having that community focus coming in. What are you doing for the community? How is your digital aspect driving your physical in-store location once it opens up? And because of the anticipated capacity issues that we're all going to be facing. If you had a store that had a capacity of 300 people and now it's just 100, it will be solely based on service, education. What does the product do for you? Less convenience buys, less, I'm just going to go buy it for a Friday night because I need it. And truly more, if I'm going to go to a physical store right now and for the next 18 months, I want it to tick a few boxes. I want to know it's safe. I want to know that I'm getting guidance from the service element. And is there a click and collect will be essential. And if brands can get those three, they can still have that footfall. It's going to be a different footfall, but they will still have that footfall in store. And of course, they'll still have that consumer and brand loyalty.
Yeah. So, Andrea, last question because we're running out of time. I just, as a seasoned observer of people and consumers, I was just kind of fascinated on a, I guess, more personal level, living through these last few weeks and a couple of months. Have you thought differently about people and the way we live our lives and the world we're in?
Yeah, I actually have. I mean, one of the things we discuss from my family is I'm on the road quite a bit. I think I average 117,000 air miles each year. So one, it's just the impact of being home and really having that time with my family. You know, the values and priorities that shift. We just did a huge report called the Happiness Spectrum, and that is essentially what does happiness and values mean post COVID. So that's shifted for me from a consumer aspect. And just Los Angeles, what's been fascinating to see is, again, a real coming together. So while wider right now in the US, we might be having some fragmentation politically based on states versus kind of federal challenges, there has been a real return of, I've spoken to my neighbors more in the past 3 months than I ever have as long as I've lived here. And that's something I hope continues to stay and thrive. And on the flip side, again, just so much aware of my own impacts on, you know, shopping and the environment and what I need versus what I don't. And just the celebration of people coming together, as cheesy and Oprah as that sounds very LA. It has been fascinating to really be thankful and be aware of my community and having that to rely on. So that is one thing I hope from all of this, no matter what region you're in, we take that back.
Yeah. Andrea, it's been great talking to you and absolutely fascinating because, as we said several times, this is extraordinary times, and I certainly in my lifetime can never relate to anything like this in terms of the pace of change and what we're seeing in a matter of weeks. So would love to talk to you again in the coming weeks as part of our series of reports, because I know that you and your team are tracking this, and this is so fast moving. I think it would be great to get a fresh report from you in the coming weeks.
We would love to. The team's tracking so much right now, everything from brand immersion to what does the future of education look like? How does that impact, you know, the consumer landscape? So we're here. We're thrilled. We love to share knowledge.
That's great. Thanks very much, Andrea. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Okay.